a subject which is of interest to everyone who is anyone: education. Education, my dear, is a subject which has been wrong, which has been spoiled, which has been misled, and yet everyone who thinks he's an educationist thinks that he's the ultimate. Now, before we throw light on education as an entity, I do want to admit that every particular portion of the globe, that every country, that every continent, that every nation is extremely talented. There are no super IQs and there are no lower IQs. Skin doesn't come into it, ideology doesn't come into it, and nothing that can break up humanity into commodities can alter the concept that we're going to talk about. As you know, just a word about the Far East. Educationally is highly commendable. China particularly, they are ritualistic. The South Asians are fantastic, but they are idealistic. The Middle East is unbeatable, but it's theologistic. Coming to Europe, Europe is highly focused, and so is America. Very practical, but they're very mechanical in the proliferation of education and all that comes with it. At the moment, we'll try and keep ourselves to the much wrong subject of education in South Asia, in particular in Pakistan. We've seen all kinds of educationists propound all kinds of views on the very, very holy and pure and important and vital subject of education. There has been quite a lot of hullabaloo on what has been and what needs to be. People keep, like they say, well, somebody asked a blind man as to what an elephant looks like. So the blind man said, well, I can't see it, but I got to feel it to tell you what it's like. So they took this man close to the elephant and handed him over the tail of the elephant. And the blind man promptly said, well, an elephant is like a stick. So that's more or less what we've been doing with the subject of education. We have been myopic. We haven't seen long enough, far enough. Now, we talk about many ills that this nation, particularly the one I'm talking about, we talk about many ills that years and years of educational pursuit hasn't allowed them to progress in. But what we talk about mostly is are the outer peripheries of this great entity, education. They talk about the topics that you should teach, the subjects that you should include, the emphasis that you should have. Education, in many ways, is like history. You can play hell with it. I mean, you can wrong history as much as you like. You can malign anyone to an unacceptable degree, and you can devastate civilizations and cultures. In Pakistan, at the moment, for instance, the emphasis is all wrong. There are people who claim to be the ultimate minds in the pursuit of knowledge, but I would strongly disagree with the concept that they have been passing on to the government and to everyone else. As soon as this government took over, I made a trip to the education minister, and when I asked his assistants as to where he was, they said, well, sir, he's gone to Sweden to learn up what improvements can be done in our system of education. So I said, all right, when he comes back, do tell him that he will have a lot more on the issue from my side if he spares the time. Obviously, that's not how governments work, and that's not how bureaucracies work. You only look for superficial improvements, and you have photo shoots, and you have conferences, and you have committees. It's like the American game of baseball. A group of Chinese was visiting the United States, and they were taken to see a baseball match. So as soon as the match was over, the Chinese group was asked by the American conductor, and they said, sirs, what do you think of this game? And the Chinese promptly said, very practically as they are, they said, well, it is a good game, but too many party meetings, too many conferences. Well, yes, they all gather at a point and all pounce upon each other till somebody can find a ball and run away with it. So the essence of education obviously is a subject which requires much more time. Education, according to some sages, should be a subject which should not be pursued for the motive of earning a livelihood. Iqbal is one who thought like that. Islam promotes education for education itself. It also advocates you to go to China if need be for getting yourself educated. In Pakistan, and like many other countries around it, in Pakistan, the solution to many of the problems of this country, which are including economic, political, cultural, religious, the solution will rests on the structure of the educational tier. You do not put a child into the primary classes and you make him play around with sand and water till he learns up the alphabet, and then a few nursery rhymes, and then goes on to addition, multiplication, division, and so on. That's a mechanical way of making people literate. It's what these countries were put into on fast track so that they could fill up the utilitarian aspect of education. I want to advocate, I want to promote, I want to elaborate, I want to enlighten the government on a system of government, a system of education, which we were responsible for putting together in Africa. It's a system of education which, with amendments and modifications, is prevalent in the UK and Europe to a great extent, and also America, of course drastically modified. But the basic structural edifice remains the same. It's a system which will start of a child from class 1 to class 7, and class 7 is the forte. Class 7 is what in England and in Europe and other places is called the 11 plus exam. This is a moment when you can. This is a moment when you decide whether the child goes for a professional education or he goes for a technical education. Both of these streams being vital to the progress of the country. The 11 plus exam then divides your learning student public into doctors, engineers, and scientists, and into technicians, higher technicians, bachelors of technicalities, which you call the BTech, and so on, such that you have the best minds who become professionals in the relevant fields, and you have practical minds who pursue a technical education which fills up all your employment requirements in the country, and the surplus can then be exported to the rest of the world as the most qualified technicians, rather than allowing labor, unqualified people and artisans perhaps to make their way to countries who employ them and employ them without giving them the niche in life which would give them respect, utility, and effectiveness. Now, most countries, most governments are averse to allowing the think tanks to creep into their domains. But should somebody who matters have the time and the vision to to get some people like me to come and tell them as to what we did in many parts of the world, including, like I said, Africa, and why when I was lecturing in what some of the universities in Pakistan, including the Islamic University, I was pleasantly amazed to see many African students outdoing the local learn by rote system education Pakistani students, and I said, well, these are the seeds that were sown by us, and these are the fruits that are now being reaped by those countries. So looking forward to further many more get-togethers on the subject of education. I thank you for your patience, and I also do wish that you subscribe to this clip so that we can all get together and perhaps make some inroads into the progress in this vital field. Thank you very much.